A kid from Flint, Michigan spends his summer with some rich white kids in New England and learns a lesson that can literally transform his life. Hi, I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Well, Flint, Michigan runs about 2 to 3 years behind the rest of the country as far as the average of educational attainment goes in elementary schools and high schools there. Nevertheless, Dylan Hernandez, who wrote a column recently in the New York Times, says he wound up getting a scholarship to a summer program among these rich white kids, a program that cost normally about $10,000. He was stunned to find out that most of these kids were actually voluntarily signing up for preparation courses for the Scholastic Aptitude Test, the SAT. Of course, he had never known anybody who did such a thing, and so he didn't bother doing it himself. As a consequence of that, when he took the SAT for the first time, he didn't do very well. So, because he couldn't afford a tutor and he couldn't afford the $3,000 40-hour classes that some of his former summer friends had taken, he decided that he'd do it his own way. He took some books out of the library, which he said hardly ever seemed to have been checked out. He'd signed up for a $99 course online with Khan Academy, K-H-A-N, Khan Academy, and he commuted 2 ways every Saturday so he could take a free course offered by the University of Michigan. Long story short, when he retook the test, he did rather well and got offered a bunch of merit scholarships to go to any one of hundreds of colleges. And he will start this fall of 2017 at the University of Michigan. Now, gentlemen, we know that this must be the rarest of rare stories because we know from the mainstream media that the institutional oppression of white privilege and the bias against kids from the inner city and kids who are not entirely white just absolutely cripples people. So, Bill Whittle, do you think the New York Times has done a disservice by running this kid's column and giving false hope to so many people around the country?
Well, they've certainly done a disservice to the progressive cause because anytime a story like this leaks out, it becomes clearer and clearer to people that what's at stake here has not got anything to do with your economic background. It's got to do with your work ethic. There's something about the liberal mind that thinks that that rich people, wealthy people, successful people were made that way by the wealth fairy that swoops low over the land once a year at Easter maybe or during the lunar eclipse or something and enters various households and taps certain people and ding, you're going to be wealthy. Ding, you're going to be poor, and that you're stuck with this for the rest of your life. When in point of fact, time and time again, we find out that not only is poverty a series of decisions, but wealth is as well. And one of the most important ones is this idea of delayed gratification. The way people get to be successful in life is to be willing to take some short-term hits in order for long-term benefits. It's easier to not study than it is to study today. But if you are willing to do the extra work today, you will end up with a higher-paying job down the road, and you will end up being happier at the long run, at least in terms of financial stuff goes. So yes, as far as the white privilege goes, I just want to say one thing, because, this is like the third rail. It's time to just get over this whole thing. I really do believe that there is white privilege, and the white privilege is this. The white privilege is that we don't get to blame our mistakes on somebody else, and the white privilege is that it's nobody's fault but mine. I don't get to believe in a conspiracy that's holding me down. If I make a mistake, it's my mistake. If I fail, it's my failure. I don't ever remember getting a check from the Society of White People to keep black people down. I don't remember where the meetings were or any of that stuff. So the point of fact is, it's this ability to not have an external excuse that allows you to succeed. And it sounds like this young man got the picture, and anybody else could too, I think.
Well, Stephen Green, I think you and I will both agree, along with all of our viewers, how unfortunate it is that Bill Whittle had to play the race card like that. The fact that he's a rich white guy that can't possibly understand the lived experience of people in the inner city. And I'm not being entirely facetious here, because I have any number of friends who have told me that I just don't get it because I don't live that experience. I don't see the both institutional and cultural racism. I don't see the uphill battle that they face in trying, to achieve, and that in essence, because of my very appearance, doors open for me of which I am unaware. And yet, how do you think that this column by young Dylan Hernandez slipped past the editors at the New York Times?
Well, maybe they thought they were doing a good deed. Maybe it was their affirmative action column for the week. I don't even pretend to understand how their brains work in the progressive media. But listen, being rich and white, these are certainly not disadvantages. Bill reminded me of just a vile phrase from the Clinton administration. I think it was Bill Clinton who used this: the winners of life's lottery. So we're just random chance handing out success, but it's not. The real advantage these kids had, these rich white kids, isn't that they're rich or that their parents are rich or that they're white. Although, as I said, it's not a hindrance. The real advantage is their parents set the expectation that these kids were going to do well on their SATs and go to school. They set the expectation that you're going to prepare for these SATs. And here comes this kid from Flint, Michigan, maybe it's something in the water there, I don't know, who gets this example kind of secondhand at this summer thing, and he goes, wait a minute, maybe there's something to this prep thing that he wasn't getting from his teachers, and I guess he wasn't getting from his parents either. And as it turns out, he didn't need to get it from his parents. He didn't need $3,000 to take the test. All he needed was for somebody, even if it was his fellow students, to set the example that preparation is smart, preparation pays off, and then he got his rear end down to the local library, did the prep work himself, God, what a great kid, and then succeeded at his SATs and gets all the scholarships. That's what it is, though. It's the example, it's the expectation, it's the setting standards for your kids and then helping them to live up to those.
I got to dive in. When you were setting up that question for Steve, this idea that white people are privileged in ways that we don't see, that somebody's going to have to explain it to me, because just to put this in a nutshell, if you're actually telling me that Harvard University has one slot left, and on one hand you've got a young white male Baptist from Alabama, and on the other hand you've got a lesbian Palestinian from San Francisco, you cannot possibly tell me that in any college in America that's going to be a fair decision. Not in one of them.
East Asian kids are getting locked out of the Ivy League because their test scores are too good.
And
they're trying to get admitted in proportions that don't fit the progressive narrative. And so you've got some of our best and brightest, and who the hell cares what color their skin is, but some of our best and brightest not getting into these schools to make room for kids who don't complete their 4-year education because they shouldn't have been let in the first place.
Well, and I think the answer to Bill's hypothetical is obvious as to who gets in. But I think the argument from the other side would be it's not that. It's not that we make the final cut to get into Harvard and, the black kid gets in or the white kid gets in or the Muslim or the lesbian or whatever. I think the point would be is that the institutional barriers to even getting to that place, the expectations, and I'll concede this point, though it's no concession at all, and that is that I think what we saw in Dylan Hernandez's case was he was exposed to something to which he had not previously been exposed. And that exposure was to the possibility that he could actually take something that would improve his SAT scores, that might qualify him for merit scholarships. And so instead of the merit scholarships literally going to the meritorious kids who had no need of scholarships, it actually went to a kid who could use a scholarship, and earned it on the basis of merit. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And it's tough to hear it from me or from Bill or from Steve, frankly. If you're watching this right now and you're living in that inner city situation, and if you I'm assuming, although Dylan is a very, very Anglo first name, Hernandez is not so Anglo. So it's quite possible that this is a Latino kid who had the blinders removed for a moment and thought, wow, this is not how I grew up. This is not what I experienced. It's not so much what he was consciously told by his parents that you can't cut it, you can't make it, you don't have a chance. Every parent has dreams for their kids. But I think ultimately it was just that exposure to those kinds of experiences that he had never shared. And this is what I think the tragedy of Charles Murray's book Coming Apart is this sectoring off of different people in economic strata and in racial groupings, so that we have very little contact with each other. I think not only impoverishes kids from the inner city who don't get to see what it could be like to have an opportunity like that, but it impoverishes me as well. Bill, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just can't. I don't mean to take up your segment. I just got to jump in here on this.
Please do.
This this idea that yes, we can say that it's a question of hard work, but that's coming from our perch of tremendous white privilege. Listen, I was flat broke for 2 decades. I spent 2 decades where I had to decide to pay the rent or the electricity. I went for 15, 16 years. I had to go down to the electric department with cash in hand, stand in line to get my power turned back on again. And I did not have 4 figures in a bank account till I was 45, consistently. 4 figures. So this idea that just because you're white means you don't know what poverty is, and just because you're white you don't know what struggle is, and just because you're white you don't know what hardship is just an absolute load of crap. It's absolute utter crap. The reason I'm sitting here today is because I didn't give up. I probably failed 15 times. Every time was more spectacular. I've been a limo driver, I've been a waiter, I've been a security guard. I've done all of these things. So this idea that how can you possibly talk about what people who don't have your advantages know, it's like, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to buy it. I've been there. I know what it's like.
So, and not to extend this beyond its reasonable length, but, it's funny because I'm working on my own book right now called How I Squandered My White Privilege in 30 Years of Poverty. But I guess I'm wondering if we've been walking on eggshells around folks that we really need to just say, suck it up.
Yes.
The life is tough, and we each have our own handicap. Yours may be race. I don't know. That's not my lived experience, but we all have our various handicaps. And the most loving thing I can say to you is suck it up and do the best you can. Put the work in. Use your innovative, creative mind. Believe that you live in a country where opportunity still counts for something and where merit can actually take you quite far toward your American dream. Well, for Bill Whittle, Stephen Green, and the rest of the crew here at BillWhittle.com, I'm Scott Ott. Thank you to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this right angle possible.